In this video, we explain the configuration tool and what it does. It's a minor self-contained component that gets installed with the AAI server. It stores most of the configurable settings for AAI, and we use it to make adjustments to certain parts of AAI like system parameters and third-party connections. The config tool has tabs for each configuration group, and we'll describe all of them. In certain cases, the config tool is just updating some files in the AAI file system. In others, it sets maintenance procedures for the database or simply reports on port status. Some of these changes require restart of the AAI server, others take effect immediately. Let's start with some basic information. The config tool is a simple UI that gets installed on the same host and at the same time as the AAI server on both Windows and Unix platforms. It serves as a repository of sorts of AAI settings and a UI to some of the configuration files for things like database connections or telemetry configuration. We use a simple executable to start the config tool on Windows and the run.sh file on Unix. The config tool has a dedicated directory called config in the AAI file system and a log file to troubleshoot config tool issues, which should be rare. The log file is found in config/log. The first tab is Database. It shows the database connection settings, which are reflected in the jboss/standalone/configuration/jaws database.xml file. Any change made here is usually the result of some major alteration to the AAI instance, like a migration, and so it requires a restart. The Telemetry tab contains the telemetry settings, which are needed for contractual purposes with Broadcom. The configuration file telemetry.xml is also found in the jboss configuration directory. The Ports tab shows the host ports that would be used by the AAI solution. They're either used or available depending on setup. No change is possible in this tab. It depends on what was deployed. The Logging tab shows the logs that are currently active. These are normally found under jboss/standalone/log, and their configuration is reflected in the logging.properties file in the configuration directory. This applies to all logs we use for support and troubleshooting: the AAI server, telemetry, the simulation service, and more. Logging.properties settings can be changed on the fly without a restart. By default, all active logs are set to info for standard error and standard output, but you can disable, show errors, errors and warnings, or even activate tracing with the debug setting. The most important logs are jaws.log, which is the central product log and traces all operational events; server.log, which traces events at startup; audit.log, which traces changes to user accounts like profiles and passwords; maintenance.log, which traces all automated maintenance events like purges of DB history records. The Intervals tab shows the frequency of polling of scheduler data by AAI. In order to build up its job stream and run data, AAI needs to source this data from the scheduler. It extracts two data points: job executions, which are dynamic, and job definitions, which are static and do not evolve very often. This tab sets the polling cycles for each. These settings can be adjusted in the AAI web UI or here, and the values always match across interfaces. The jammer sets the ops data, meaning job executions, and the interval should be quite short, say every 30 seconds, because of the dynamic nature of the data. The converter extracts definitions. It is set on a longer interval, which can be every 30 minutes or even every day, depending on the scheduler deployment phase and the frequency with which the deployment teams update their definitions. We also set the cycle of execution of the statistics engine on this tab. This is the internal AAI process that calculates run averages for reporting purposes across all job stream runs. It's resource intensive and can have impacts on performance. As a result, we set the engine very carefully at a time of day when activity is low and things are quiet in AAI. Finally, any change you make here does not require a restart. The AAI database requires automated maintenance, which can be set in the config tool. There are two active processes for maintenance: the loader and the worker. The loader runs calculations and identifies what needs to be purged based on these config tool settings. The worker does the purging. Maintenance is done based on the number of days. AAI imports job run data from the scheduler and accumulates job stream run data dynamically each time a job stream runs, which matches a job run. Typically, we'll keep more records for scheduled job runs and fewer job stream runs. We have a setting for general maintenance and log file maintenance as well. In the configuration tool, we set the volume of job run data AAI retains. This is the data extracted from the scheduler. The same applies to job stream runs. General maintenance applies to other things like in-queue runs as well. Logs stored in the jboss/standalone/log directory see new instances every time they reach a certain size, and old logs are retained with a date stamp. Log maintenance deletes these old logs based on a set number of days. In the Params tab, we configure all granular options, and there are hundreds. We're not going to cover all of them. It's best to look them up when you're trying to do something specific. A good example is the Start Jobs function. It needs to be enabled in the config tool. There are multiple types of settings, frequently configured, less common, where the job start function is found, hidden settings, and settings that cannot be edited. To navigate from one to the next, you have a drop-down menu. Some of the params require restart, while others take effect immediately. Finally, we have tab Other, in which we can set the Java Virtual Machine RAM settings based on the quantity of data you have to manage and the performance you expect from the web interfaces. You can also take active schedulers offline the same way you do in the web interfaces. You can define the SNMP service and the SMTP server. All of these require active AAI restarts.